During the early hours on the 27th of May 2023, a young woman ordered or waved down a taxi while pulling a suitcase. There's nothing unusual in that, but there was something unusual within this woman. Her destination was a riverside area called Yangsan, near the Nakdong River, which is roughly 12 miles northwest of Busan in South Korea. Upon their arrival to a deserted road where the passenger asked the driver to pull over, the man obliged and consequently displayed his courtesy when opening the trunk of the vehicle to hand the lady her suitcase. However, when he handed the luggage over, he noticed it was wet. And once he got back inside his taxi, he checked his hands and was alarmed to find them a reddish colour, a colour that appeared to be blood. He then found it highly unusual to watch the woman disappear into a wooded area. He wasn't too sure what to make of this, but felt uncomfortable regarding what he had witnessed. Concerned it was something sinister, he immediately phoned 112, South Korea's emergency services, describing what had happened. The police took his concern seriously and dispatched a number of officers to the scene. What they discovered not only sent shockwaves throughout South Korea, but also identified the existence of a newly developing psychopath. Before we revisit what took place on that dreadful night, I think it would be appropriate to talk about the identity of the woman. Her name is Yu Zhong, a 23-year-old who, as you can see, has a youthful-looking round face with circular thin-frame glasses. She looks like an innocent, relatively pretty young character who could easily have been mistaken for a librarian. Although she wasn't a librarian, she had a deep connection to certain types of books and literature, so bear that in mind for later on in the story. Yu Zhong was a resident of Busan in South Korea, a city with a population of 3.4 million. The people who live there are generally very warm and kind. I guess their peaceful ocean views contribute to this. It's also known for its temples such as the Haedong Yeonsa, which is located in the mountains while being situated alongside the coast. There's a popular belief that prayers offered at this temple are actually answered. Busan is additionally home to the world's largest department store according to the Guinness Book of Records. And while it's a relatively safe city, it's not crime-free, as I'm sure we wouldn't expect. People who visit are encouraged to use caution, like placing credit cards or other valuable items in different pockets, and that's due to the high volume of petty criminals whose expertise is removing those items without the victim's knowledge. There was something Yu Zhong wanted to do without people becoming aware of it, and she wasn't a petty criminal in any way. In fact, she didn't even have a criminal record, and those who knew her had no idea that there was a developing obsession taking place in her mind. While she was growing up in Busan, a number of difficulties were faced. At the age of 1, her mother allegedly abandoned her, and just a few years later, at age 6, her father did the same thing. This unfortunate circumstance introduced feelings of resentment within the child. Rather than being placed in care, Zhong's grandfather stepped up and raised her, but their relationship was somewhat strained. Nonetheless, he did his best for the young girl. When she was younger, her school friends described Zhong as a quiet but nice person with a sweet disposition, someone they enjoyed being around, who engaged in various school activities and avoided getting into trouble. By the time she attended high school, though, her demeanour had changed. In this image, she's standing with a group of classmates, yet gives the impression of not wanting to be there. Instead of associating with her peers, she often avoided them like the plague, eating alone, studying alone, or trying to make herself invisible. If anyone attempted to engage in conversation or build a relationship with her, Zhong made it clear to them that she had no interest. The best she could offer was a yes or no to their questions. There was no room for dialogue. Yet she was never teased or bullied for such unusual behaviour. At the age of 18, she left school, which is normal in South Korea. However, she had issues with her English skills, and that was a problem because in South Korea, English is a required language from elementary school onward. It's usually necessary for employment purposes. 5 years after leaving and still living with her grandfather, Zhang by now had a serious inferiority complex over her lack of English, which appears to have made it difficult for her to get a job. In addition to those problems, it seems as though she literally hated her life. During that time, she had at least one job interview, which could have offered a new start, but she failed miserably to secure the position. Employment was something she never experienced. Instead, she became a complete loner, living in isolation, while holding on to her increasing bitterness toward her father. In actual fact, on the 23rd of May in 2023, she spoke to her father over the phone, telling him about her plan of doing something bad so that he would suffer, before suggesting she would then do away with herself. This is the part where we find out what happened when the taxi driver picked her up in the early hours of the 27th of May. Prior to that, at 5:30ish in the afternoon on the 26th, Zhang had knocked on the door of a 26-year-old woman who lived alone in Busan. She was invited in by the lady who was actually expecting her, which we'll get to in a moment. But as soon as she entered the home, Zhang violently attacked the unsuspecting host, stabbing her repeatedly until she was dead, and even continued after death, inflicting in excess of 100 stab wounds. Not long after this, she was caught on surveillance cameras making her way home. The reason for her journey became evident as another image captures her returning to the victim's apartment with a suitcase on wheels. Yu Zhang made several visits back and forth from the victims as well as to her own residence. She was even seen buying cleaning products and waste bags at 2 different stores. The way she's observed carrying these items gives me the impression it's as if she's returning from a friend's house after playing an intense, exhilarating video game. But we know she doesn't have any friends. The reality is she can't wait to get back to continue her grisly work. And it truly was grisly as she cut up and dismembered the victim. In addition to the fatal wounds, there was a series of knife slices aimed at the palms and fingertips of the murdered girl. Some reports claim the fingers were severed, allegedly to make it more difficult for identification. Parts of the victim were then placed in a suitcase wrapped in plastic bags, before Zhang approached the taxi driver, who watched her dump the bags near the Nakdong River 12 miles away. After the switched-on driver called the emergency services dialing 112, giving them the information they needed, the police were able to quickly trace the location of the perpetrator, arresting Zhang at 6 a.m. that same morning. Regarding the bags dumped near the river, they were found to contain blood-stained clothing and some human remains. When the police arrived at Zhang's residence, they checked the suitcase, finding it empty, but they did notice blood spots on its inside. They inquired about this. Now we're going to hear something that almost stunned me. Yu Zhang told them she was menstruating. In other words, it was her blood. As a result of that, they took her to hospital for a checkup, as their suspicions were piqued. The checkup revealed there were no signs of menstruation. The woman had to think quickly and came up with what I can only describe as a jaw-dropping explanation. She said she'd just given birth to a baby and had no option but to get rid of it, and that was the reason for the blood. To try to get to the bottom of that, an ultrasound of a uterus was performed. Again, there was no evidence to suggest that she'd given birth. Yu Zhang was clearly lying, leading to the police taking her in for questioning, perhaps wondering what other excuses would be presented to them. Sure enough, more lies were expressed. Initially, she told the police someone else committed the murder, an individual unknown to her, but whoever it was apparently ordered Zhang to get rid of the body. If she followed those instructions, the killer would allow her to live, while simultaneously permitting her to take on the identity of the victim. She decided to change the story to one that might convince them, switching to saying it was an accident, as a result of an argument between her and the deceased, but everything she said had no substance. However, evidence was discovered after a thorough forensic analysis of surveillance footage plus data recovered from Yu Zhang's personal devices, such as her mobile phone. Her research history revealed 3 months' worth of recent activity pertaining to research on questions such as how to kill someone and how to dispose of a body. She'd been doing this obsessively over a 12-week period with only one thing on her mind, and that was to find someone to kill. It was also made known that the 23-year-old spent a lot of time watching true crime on the internet, while her library card indicated an avid interest in reading up on the subject. She went on to explain to the police that she watched a certain movie more than once. It was a psychological thriller where a woman killed another woman and stole her identity to live a fake life, similar to the story she relayed when lying that someone else made the kill, but offered her the deceased person's identity if she got rid of the body. Investigators were struggling to comprehend what they were hearing, but started getting closer to the truth, especially when they learned that she downloaded an app that connects parents with private tutors, astonishingly presenting herself as the mother to a 9th grader, a 14 to 15-year-old who needed English lessons. She then contacted the tutor the day after telling her father she was about to do something bad. An appointment was arranged for the pretend 9th grader to visit the teacher 2 days later on the 26th. As you can see in this footage, the girl in the school uniform is Yu Zhong, who purchased the outfit online ahead of the meeting. Being a small woman helped with pulling this off. You would never imagine she was on the way to commit a horrible murder, casually walking past people, contemplating what she's about to do. The uniform she's wearing became bloody during the violent attack, not long after this, after which she stole some of her victim's clothing before leaving the premises to go home. She went home for the suitcase, plus her visits to the shops to buy things for disposal purposes. We can now see in this image the change of clothes, as she emerges with the suitcase containing the body parts. If you look closely enough, you can see a spring in her step, as if she's very happy with her accomplishments. With all of the evidence piling against her, including the surveillance footage, her blood-stained suitcase, the remains of the victim's body parts found near the Nakdon River, the limbs that hadn't been discarded yet, plus the fact she kept documents belonging to the victim and the involvement of her family pleading with her to tell the truth, Zhong finally confessed. South Korean law very rarely allows the identity of criminals to be made public. It's only under certain conditions, such as when a crime is so violent or depraved and has a significant impact on society, that authorities will release details regarding the offender. This was one of those unusual cases. However, the identity of the victim was never disclosed. Chillingly, a forensic analysis of Zhong's phone determined she'd contacted 54 online tutors. Her goal was to identify those who were willing to provide services from their own home. It was also important that they were young women in their 20s who lived alone. When interrogated by the police, the killer displayed an eerily calm composure while sharing details about the crime. The truth finally came out when she said something to the effect that she murdered the victim out of curiosity. She said that while blaming true crime for piquing her curiosity. Her attitude was highly abnormal, as displayed in some written memos investigators came across. One of the messages she penned suggested she was unable to release her anger unless she murdered someone. The crime was meticulously planned over a 3-month period, capturing the attention of experts who thoroughly examined the circumstances. Some of them believe she probably killed the woman because she was envious of her lifestyle. After all, the victim attended a prestigious university and had a strong social standing within the community. And this is what may have attracted Zhong to choose her as a target, considering her own life was isolated, filled with tension, resentment, and completely empty of any social interaction. A couple of weeks after the murder, Zhong appeared before the media, who were keen to understand the motive. And this is what she had to say.
살인 충동을 혹시 언제부터 느끼신 걸까요?
피해자는 유가족께 할 말 없습니까?
피해자와 유가족분들에게 전 진심으로 죄송합니다.
살해 후에 여러 차례 집을 오가셨는데 혹시 이유가 있었을까요?
실종 사건으로 위장하려고 했습니까?
제정신이 아니었던 것 같습니다. 죄송합니다.
Her voice, a relatively gentle one, is rather worrisome. We know she was literally desperate to commit murder and achieved that objective. However, if she wanted to make it appear as if the victim simply vanished without trace, well, that objective collapsed as a result of the mistakes that she made, leading to her recent sentencing on Friday the 24th of November 2023, where the prosecution demanded the death sentence even though an execution there in South Korea hasn't been carried out since 1997. Fortunately for Jeong, the judge sentenced her to life in prison. When she turns 43, she'll be eligible for parole. But I still can't get it out of my mind how she blamed true crime material as the reason for the killing. If watching, reading or studying true crime content had that kind of an effect on us, I would have gone off the rail years ago, and I'm sure many others would have done the same. So no, it wasn't true crime that motivated her. Instead, something in her brain, her psyche, might have been influenced by the formation of an obsessive, abnormal personality. Authorities felt it was important for her to undertake a psychopathy test. The average person's score for such a test is around 15 max. The same test was conducted on Kang Ho's son, a South Korean serial killer who murdered 10 people before he was captured in 2009. He scored 27, and anything above 25 is considered psychopathic. Jeong scored higher than him, meaning her score must have been at least 28. Admittedly, I'm not sure how robust or accurate this particular tool is. Nonetheless, it was unfortunate how an innocent 26-year-old who was trying to get by in the world came across Yu Jeong, the developing psychopath, who had just spent 3 months obsessively researching how to murder someone and get away with it. What a frightening story.